John Kennedy stuns Adam Schiff on live TV with a savage comeback audience left in shock. The CNN studio was alive with anticipation as the cameras swept across the polished set of America's future policy in focus. The evening's topic was the Education Reform Act, a bold legislative proposal co-sponsored by Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, aimed at revolutionizing the nation's approach to preparing its workforce. The bill allocated $2 billion over 5 years to expand vocational training fund public-private partnerships for apprenticeships and provide grants to community colleges to align curricula with local job markets. It had sparked surprising bipartisan interest, drawing endorsements from educators, trade unions, and business leaders concerned about skyrocketing college costs and student debt. But not all were convinced. Congressman Adam Schiff, a seasoned Democrat from California, known for his articulate and incisive critiques, was invited to challenge the bill's merits. What unfolded was no ordinary policy debate. It was a riveting clash of ideas, with Kennedy's meticulous preparation, sharp wit, and relatable storytelling, turning the segment into a viral sensation that left the studio audience stunned and set social media ablaze. Host Laura Bennett, a veteran journalist with a knack for keeping debates civil yet engaging, opened the segment with a crisp introduction. Tonight we're diving into the Education Reform Act, a proposal that could reshape how America educates its future workforce, she said, her tone signaling the weight of the discussion. This bill promises to boost vocational training and reduce reliance on costly college degrees. But it's not without controversy. She turned first to Congressman Schiff, who sat confidently in a tailored navy suit, his posture relaxed, but his gaze sharp, ready to dissect the legislation. Schiff launched into his critique with the polish of a seasoned debater. Senator Kennedy's bill, while well-intentioned, fundamentally misunderstands what our education system needs. He began, his voice measured and authoritative. By prioritizing trade schools and vocational programs, it risks sidelining the critical thinking and innovation fostered by four-year universities. This approach might resonate in certain rural districts, but it fails to address the diverse needs of students in urban and suburban communities across America. We need a balanced investment in all forms of education, not a pivot that could leave millions behind. Schiff's argument leaned heavily on the prestige of traditional higher education, citing statistics about the lifetime earning potential of college graduates, $1 million more than non-degree holders, he claimed, and warning that the bill's focus on vocational training could exacerbate inequalities by steering lower-income students away from elite institutions. With all due respect to the senator, Schiff continued, his tone carrying a subtle sting. This legislation reflects a perspective that's more regional than national. I've worked closely with educators and students in California, and I can tell you that a one-size-fits-all push for trade schools doesn't hold up in the real world. The senator's experience in education policy seems limited compared to those who've grappled with these issues for decades. The jab was calculated, implying that Kennedy, hailing from Louisiana with its conservative leanings, lacked the breadth to craft a bill of such scope. The studio audience, a mix of policy analysts, educators, and engaged citizens, shifted in their seats, sensing the debate was about to escalate. Laura Bennett turned to Kennedy, her expression neutral but expectant. Senator Kennedy, Congressman Schiff, has raised concerns about the practicality and scope of your Education Reform Act. Your response? The camera zoomed in on Kennedy, his weathered face breaking into a slight, almost mischievous smile that hinted at the verbal dexterity to come. Well, Laura, I'm mighty grateful for the congressman's passion. Kennedy began his Louisiana drawl, lending a folksy warmth to his words. But I'm afraid he's got this bill all wrong. Before I got to the Senate, I spent a lot of time talking to real folks, teachers, welders, small business owners, students, who live the consequences of our education system every single day. Unlike my colleague, I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know how to listen to the people this bill's meant to help. The audience chuckled softly at the subtle dig, but Kennedy was just warming up. He pulled a small notepad from his pocket, a signature prop that signaled he was about to get specific. "Let's talk facts," Kennedy said, glancing at Schiff with a nod. "The congressman says we're sidelining 4-year degrees. That's just not so." This bill increases funding for community colleges by 15%, creates tax credits for businesses that partner with schools to train students, and sets up grants for states to make vocational programs accessible to every high school graduate. In Louisiana, our community colleges have doubled trade program enrollment in the past 5 years, and 78% of those graduates are employed within 6 months, earning good wages, $60,000 or more, in fields like welding and IT. Compare that to the national average, where nearly 40% of college graduates are underemployed, working jobs that don't require a degree. Now, I'm not saying don't go to college, my goodness. I went to college myself. But we've got to stop pretending a $100,000 degree is the only path to a good life. The audience erupted in applause, and Schiff's expression tightened, sensing Kennedy was seizing control of the narrative. Kennedy leaned forward, his tone still conversational, but now razor-sharp. "The congressman says this bill won't work in places like California." Well, let's talk about California. In the congressman's state public university tuition has shot up 60% in the last decade, while only 48% of students graduate within 6 years. The average student debt there, $38,000. If that's the system the congressman thinks is working just fine, I'd hate to see what he calls a failure. The studio audience gasped audibly, stunned by Kennedy's command of California-specific data. Schiff's eyes widened, clearly caught off guard by the senator's preparedness. Kennedy pressed his advantage. "Our bill funds programs that get folks jobs without burying them in debt. In Ohio, a Republican-led state, similar reforms have cut youth unemployment by 2%. In Wisconsin, technical colleges have trained 10,000 workers in 3 years for high-demand jobs. These aren't pipe dreams, they're results." The room buzzed with energy, and social media began lighting up with clips of Kennedy's performance. Hashtags like #KennedyClaps. Back and education reform now started trending as viewers shared his quips and statistics. Schiff, now on the defensive, tried to counter. "Senator, California's universities are world-class, and we're tackling affordability," he said. "Your bill risks creating a 2-tiered system where only the wealthy can access degrees that lead to leadership roles." It was a solid point, but it felt rehearsed, lacking the specificity of Kennedy's rebuttal. Kennedy didn't miss a beat. "The congressman talks about earnings," he said, flipping a page in his notepad. "Electricians, plumbers, coders, jobs. This bill supports earn over $70,000 a year, no degree needed. Compare that to a humanities major's $45,000 with $30,000 in debt. If we're talking fairness, let's talk about not forcing kids to borrow against their future just to get a shot at a job." The audience roared again, louder this time, and the producers in the control room knew they had a viral moment. They extended the segment, sensing Kennedy's blend of data and relatability was captivating viewers. Laura Bennett gave Schiff a chance to respond, but his reply, "We need a balanced approach to education," felt flat against Kennedy's precision. Kennedy closed with a folksy flourish that played perfectly to the camera. "Folks, this bill isn't about telling anyone not to chase a degree. It's about saying whether you want to be a welder a nurse, or a philosopher, America's got a path for you. If the congressman thinks that's a bad idea, I'd love to hear him explain why to the folks back home who are working hard to build a future without breaking the bank. As the segment cut to commercial, the audience erupted, and Schiff's expression showed a mix of surprise and respect. Kennedy had turned a policy debate into a defining moment, proving that preparation and authenticity could reshape the conversation around education reform. The CNN studio lights dimmed as the commercial break ended, but the energy from Senator John Kennedy's stunning performance still lingered in the air. The viral clips of his exchange with Congressman Adam Schiff were already racking up views on social media, with commentators across the spectrum marveling at Kennedy's ability to blend hard data with a relatable down-home charm. The hashtag #KennedyClapsBack was trending nationwide, and policy wonks were dissecting every moment of the debate. But what made this moment so extraordinary wasn't just Kennedy's on-air delivery, it was the meticulous preparation and strategic foresight that went into crafting his response long before the cameras started rolling. Behind the scenes, Kennedy's approach to the CNN segment revealed a masterclass in how to dominate a policy debate, know your facts, anticipate your opponent's moves, and never underestimate the power of connecting with the audience on a human level. This chapter delves into the groundwork that set Kennedy up for success, the brilliance of his debate tactics, and the immediate ripple effects that began to reshape the conversation around the Education Reform Act. Long before he stepped onto the CNN set, Senator Kennedy knew the Education Reform Act would face skepticism from critics like Schiff, who represented a state with a strong tradition of elite universities and a vocal constituency invested in traditional higher education. Kennedy's team, a tight-knit group of policy advisors and researchers, had spent weeks preparing for this moment. They pored over the details of the bill, which allocated $2 billion over 5 years to expand vocational training programs, establish public-private partnerships for apprenticeships, and provide grants to community colleges to develop curricula tailored to local job markets. But Kennedy didn't stop at mastering his own legislation. He instructed his staff to dig into Schiff's public record, analyzing his past statements on education, his voting history, and the challenges facing California's education system. They uncovered a treasure trove of data. California's public universities were grappling with rising tuition costs, stagnant graduation rates, and a growing student debt crisis. Kennedy saw an opportunity not to attack Schiff personally, but to expose the weaknesses in his argument by contrasting California's struggles with the practical solutions his bill offered. Kennedy's preparation went beyond numbers. He spent hours talking to constituents in Louisiana, welders, electricians, teachers, and small business owners who shared stories of how vocational training had transformed their lives. One conversation stuck with him, a young woman named Sarah, a single mother who completed a 6-month welding program at a community college and now earned $65,000 a year at a local shipyard. Stories like hers became the heart of Kennedy's pitch, grounding the bill in real-world impact rather than abstract policy debates. He also studied successful programs in other states like Wisconsin's technical college system and Ohio's apprenticeship initiatives, which had measurable outcomes, lower unemployment rates, higher job placement, and reduced student debt. Armed with this research, Kennedy walked into the CNN studio not just as a senator, but as a storyteller ready to make the case for a new vision of American education. On air, Kennedy's strategy was a blend of precision and personality. He knew Schiff would lean on the prestige of 4-year degrees and paint the Education Reform Act as a step backward. So Kennedy preempted this by framing his bill as a matter of choice, not competition. This isn't about telling kids not to go to college, he had said, his Louisiana drawl softening the edges of his argument. It's about making sure every young person has a path that fits their dreams and their wallet. This line wasn't improvised. It was workshopped with his team to resonate with viewers who felt trapped by the rising costs of higher education. Kennedy's use of humor was another calculated move. When he quipped, "When did it become a crime in America to teach a young person how to fix a car?" He wasn't just making the audience laugh, he was dismantling Schiff's elitist undertones by celebrating the dignity of skilled trades. His notepad, a signature prop, served as both a visual cue of his preparedness and a tool to keep his facts straight, ensuring he never stumbled over a statistic. Kennedy's most devastating moment came when he turned Schiff's critique back on him using California's own education challenges to undermine the congressman's authority. By citing the state's 48% six-year graduation rate and $38,000 average student debt, Kennedy exposed a chink in Schiff's armor. For all his talk of academic excellence, California's system was failing many of its students. This wasn't a personal attack. It was a policy-driven rebuttal that showed Kennedy's command of the facts and his ability to connect them to the broader American experience. He didn't need to raise his voice or resort to theatrics. His calm conversational tone made his points hit harder, as if he were explaining the issue to a neighbor over coffee. The audience felt it, and so did the viewers at home, who flooded social media with praise for Kennedy's clarity and relatability. The immediate aftermath of the segment was electric. Within minutes, clips of Kennedy's responses were shared by education advocates, conservative commentators, and even some progressive voices who admired his focus on practical solutions. A tweet from a prominent education policy analyst read, "Senator Kennedy just showed how to win a debate. Know your stuff, stay calm, and talk like a human being. At Education Reform Now." Another user, a community college instructor, posted, "Finally someone standing up for the kids who don't want a $100,000 degree." Kennedy gets it. The segment's viewership spiked, with CNN reporting a 15% increase in live viewers compared to the previous week's episode. Behind the scenes, Kennedy's team was inundated with messages from colleagues in the Senate, who saw the debate as a turning point for the Education Reform Act. 2 Republican senators and 1 Democrat reached out within hours, expressing interest in co-sponsoring the bill after seeing Kennedy's compelling defense. Schiff, meanwhile, found himself in an unfamiliar position. Known for his polished media appearances, he was caught off guard by Kennedy's preparedness and ability to pivot from defense to offense. In the green room after the segment, Schiff was overheard telling an aide I didn't expect him to have California's numbers at his fingertips. While Schiff maintained his composure on air, his team quickly realized they needed to regroup. They began drafting a follow-up statement to clarify his position, emphasizing his support for balanced education reform, a subtle shift that suggested Kennedy's arguments had forced him to reconsider his approach. The exchange also caught the attention of education advocacy groups who saw Kennedy's performance as a chance to push for broader support. The National Association of Community Colleges issued a statement praising the senator's common-sense approach to making education accessible and affordable, while a coalition of trade unions endorsed the bill, citing its potential to create jobs. Kennedy's team knew the debate was more than a fleeting moment. They capitalized on the viral attention by sharing additional data on the bill's benefits, including infographics showing how vocational programs in states like Texas and Michigan had reduced youth unemployment by up to 3%. They also coordinated with local media in Louisiana to highlight success stories like the welding program that helped Sarah and others like her. These efforts kept the conversation alive, ensuring the Education Reform Act remained in the public eye. Meanwhile, Kennedy himself stayed focused, declining to gloat, and instead using follow-up interviews to double down on the bill's merits. "This isn't about me winning a debate," he told a local radio station. It's about making sure kids have a shot at a good life without going broke. That's what we're fighting for. The ripple effects of the CNN segment were felt beyond the studio. Political analysts began citing Kennedy's performance as a case study in effective communication, with one Washington Post columnist writing, "Senator Kennedy didn't just defend his bill. He redefined the education debate by making it about people, not politics." The exchange also sparked a broader conversation about how lawmakers engage with the public. Congressional staffers reported a surge in requests for briefings on the Education Reform Act, and several House members reached out to Kennedy's office to discuss potential amendments that could strengthen bipartisan support. For Kennedy, the debate was a testament to the power of preparation and authenticity. He had walked into the lion's den of a national TV audience, faced a formidable opponent, and emerged not just victorious, but as a voice for millions of Americans who felt overlooked by the current education system. As the dust settled, it was clear that this moment would propel the Education Reform Act and Kennedy's reputation into a new phase of influence. The fallout from Senator John Kennedy's electrifying CNN debate with Congressman Adam Schiff was nothing short of a political earthquake. The viral clips of Kennedy's sharp-witted, fact-driven takedown continued to dominate social media, with hashtag Kennedy claps back and hashtag education reform now trending for days. Commentators from across the political spectrum couldn't stop talking about how Kennedy had turned a routine policy discussion into a masterclass in persuasion, using data, humor, and relatability to dismantle Schiff's critiques of the Education Reform Act. But the real impact of the exchange went far beyond a single television moment. It reshaped the trajectory of the legislation, shifted the tone of media coverage on education policy, and elevated Kennedy's stature as a formidable advocate for practical solutions. This chapter explores the broader consequences of the debate, from the surge in bipartisan support for the bill to the subtle recalibration of Schiff's approach, and the ripple effects on how education reform was discussed in the public square. In the days following the CNN segment, the Education Reform Act became a focal point in Washington. Kennedy's performance had done more than just defend the bill, it had made it a cause célèbre. Within 48 hours, 4 additional House members, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, signed on as co-sponsors, citing Kennedy's clear explanation of the bill's benefits. One Republican representative from Ohio, a former small business owner, told reporters, "I was skeptical about this bill until I saw Senator Kennedy lay out the numbers." His point about Ohio's apprenticeship programs hit home. "Those are working for my constituents, and this bill builds on that success." The bipartisan momentum was unexpected, but welcome, as the bill's provisions for vocational training and community college funding resonated with lawmakers from diverse districts. A Democratic congresswoman from Michigan, whose state had seen success with similar programs, praised Kennedy's approach. He didn't just talk about policy, he showed how it works in the real world. That's what convinced me to get on board. The debate's impact wasn't limited to Capitol Hill. Advocacy groups seized on the moment to amplify the bill's message. The National Skills Coalition, a nonpartisan organization focused on workforce development, launched a campaign highlighting the bill's potential to create 500,000 new skilled jobs over a decade. They shared Kennedy's debate clips alongside testimonials from workers who had benefited from vocational training, such as a young electrician from Georgia who credited a community college program for his $80,000-a-year career. Trade unions, traditionally aligned with Democrats, also rallied behind the bill, with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers issuing a statement. Senator Kennedy's bill respects the value of skilled trades and gives workers a path to good jobs without crushing debt. We're all in. These endorsements added credibility and urgency to the legislation, turning it into a movement that transcended party lines. Adam Schiff, meanwhile, found himself navigating uncharted waters. Known for his polished media presence, he was unaccustomed to being outmaneuvered on live television. The debate had exposed vulnerabilities in his argument, particularly his reliance on the prestige of four-year degrees without addressing the systemic issues of cost and accessibility. In the days that followed, Schiff's team worked to regain the narrative. He appeared on MSNBC, where he offered a more nuanced take on education reform, acknowledging the value of vocational training while still emphasizing the importance of college access. "I agree with Senator Kennedy that we need options for students," Schiff said, a subtle nod to his opponent's framing. "But we can't let those options come at the expense of equitable access to higher education." The shift in tone was noticeable. Gone were the dismissive jabs, replaced by a more data-driven approach that echoed Kennedy's style. Political analysts saw this as a tacit admission that Kennedy's performance had forced Schiff to elevate his game. The media landscape also began to shift in response to the debate. Where education policy discussions had often been reduced to sound bites about college affordability or standardized testing, Kennedy's focus on practical outcomes, jobs, wages, and debt reduction set a new standard. Major outlets like The Washington Post and NPR ran in-depth features on successful vocational programs, citing examples from states like Wisconsin and Texas, where community colleges had partnered with industries to train workers for high-demand fields like advanced manufacturing and healthcare. A CNN follow-up segment invited education experts to discuss the bill, with one analyst noting Kennedy's debate performance showed that you can't just talk about education in abstract terms. People want solutions that work now, and his bill speaks to that. The increased scrutiny led to a wave of fact-based reporting, with outlets fact-checking both Kennedy's and Schiff's claims. Kennedy's statistics held up, reinforcing his credibility, while Schiff's generalizations about college earnings were called out for overlooking the underemployment crisis among graduates. Kennedy's team capitalized on the momentum, working tirelessly to keep the bill in the spotlight. They organized town halls in key states, where Kennedy met with students, educators, and employers to discuss the bill's impact. At one event in Louisiana, he shared the stage with a community college president and a recent graduate who had landed a job as a wind turbine technician after a one-year training program. "This is what the Education Reform Act is about," Kennedy told the crowd, holding up the graduate's certificate. "It's about giving folks like James here a chance to build a life without a mountain of debt." The events were live-streamed, generating thousands of views and further amplifying the bill's appeal. Kennedy's staff also collaborated with social media influencers in the education space, who shared bite-sized explanations of the bill's provisions, making it accessible to younger audiences. One viral TikTok video featuring a teacher breaking down the bill's funding for trade schools garnered over 1 million views, with comments like, "Finally a politician who gets it," and "Kennedy for the win." The debate's influence extended to the halls of academia as well. Professors at public policy schools began incorporating the Kennedy-Schiff exchange into their curricula, using it to teach students about effective advocacy and debate. A Georgetown University professor told The Chronicle of Higher Education, "Kennedy's performance is a textbook example of how to combine data with storytelling. He didn't just win the argument, he changed the conversation." The clip was shown in classrooms alongside analyses of the bill's provisions, with students debating its merits and discussing how to address opponents' critiques without resorting to personal attacks. Kennedy's approach, grounded in facts but delivered with warmth and humor, became a model for aspiring policymakers. One student writing for her campus newspaper noted, "Kennedy showed that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to make the biggest impact." His preparation and authenticity carried the day. On Capitol Hill, the debate's aftermath spurred a flurry of activity. Senate staffers reported a surge in inquiries about the Education Reform Act, with lawmakers from both parties requesting briefings on its provisions. Kennedy's office became a hub of activity, fielding calls from colleagues eager to align themselves with the bill's growing popularity. A moderate Democrat from Pennsylvania, initially hesitant, signed on as a co-sponsor after meeting with Kennedy and reviewing data on how similar programs had boosted employment in her state. Even some of Schiff's allies quietly reached out, expressing admiration for Kennedy's approach and seeking ways to bridge the gap between vocational and traditional education. These conversations laid the groundwork for potential amendments to strengthen the bill, such as adding protections to ensure low-income students could access both trade schools and four-year colleges. The public response was equally telling. Polls conducted a week after the debate showed a 12-point increase in public support for expanding vocational training, with 68% of Americans agreeing that community colleges and trade schools should receive more funding to prepare students for high-demand jobs. The numbers were particularly strong among younger voters who saw the bill as a lifeline in an era of skyrocketing tuition costs. Kennedy's office received hundreds of letters and emails from constituents, many sharing personal stories of how vocational training had changed their lives, or expressing frustration with the inaccessibility of traditional college. One letter from a father in rural Louisiana read, "My son wants to be a mechanic, but the system pushes him toward a degree he can't afford. Thank you, Senator, for fighting for kids like him." As the debate's impact spread, it became clear that Kennedy had done more than win a television moment. He had ignited a movement. The Education Reform Act was no longer just a piece of legislation. It was a symbol of a broader shift toward valuing practical, accessible education. Schiff's team, recognizing the tide had turned, began quietly advising him to focus on areas of agreement with Kennedy in future appearances, a sign that even his staunchest critics respected the senator's ability to shape the narrative. For Kennedy, the moment was a validation of his belief that policy debates could be won not with shouting matches, but with preparation, clarity, and a genuine connection to the people affected by the laws he championed. As the bill moved closer to a vote, the stage was set for a new chapter in the fight for education reform, one that would test Kennedy's ability to translate a viral victory into lasting change. The reverberations of Senator John Kennedy's electrifying CNN debate with Congressman Adam Schiff continued to shape the national conversation around the Education Reform Act, transforming it from a contentious proposal into a bipartisan cause with widespread support. The viral moment had not only elevated Kennedy's reputation as a sharp-witted, fact-driven advocate, but also shifted the public and political discourse on education reform toward a focus on practical outcomes and accessibility. Months after the debate, the bill's momentum culminated in a historic vote, while Kennedy and Schiff found themselves in an unexpected partnership that symbolized the power of substantive dialogue to bridge divides. This final chapter explores the long-term impact of the confrontation, the passage of the legislation, and the profound lessons it offers about preparation, collaboration, and the potential for policy debates to inspire meaningful change. Above all, it underscores an educational takeaway that preparation and a commitment to facts can turn disagreement into opportunity, fostering progress that serves the common good. In the weeks following the CNN segment, the Education Reform Act gained traction at an unprecedented pace. The debate had galvanized lawmakers, educators, and the public with Kennedy's clear articulation of the bill's benefits, more funding for vocational training, public-private partnerships for apprenticeships, and grants for community colleges resonating across party lines. By the time the bill reached the Senate floor, It had amassed 18 CO sponsors from both parties, a rare feat in a polarized Congress. The House followed suit, and after months of negotiations, amendments, and public hearings, the Education Reform Act passed with a resounding 72-28 vote in the Senate and 295-140 in the House. The final version included provisions to ensure equitable access to both vocational and traditional college programs, addressing concerns raised by critics like Schiff, while preserving the bill's core focus on affordability and job readiness. Kennedy's office celebrated quietly, with the senator telling his team, "This isn't about us. It's about the kids who'll get a shot because of this law." The bill's passage was a testament to Kennedy's ability to translate a single debate performance into lasting legislative success. During floor debates, several senators referenced the CNN exchange with one Democrat, noting Senator Kennedy's clarity on this bill forced us all to take a closer look, and what we found was a plan that works for students and taxpayers alike. A Republican colleague from Texas added, "I've seen vocational programs change lives in my state." Kennedy's bill scales that success nationwide, and his debate performance showed us why it matters. The legislation's impact was immediate. States began applying for federal grants to expand trade schools, and businesses like construction firms and tech startups partnered with community colleges to train workers for high-demand fields. Early data showed promise. Within a year, pilot programs in 5 states reported a 15% increase in job placement for vocational graduates, with average student debt loads dropping by 20% for those in 2-year programs. Perhaps the most surprising outcome of the debate was the evolution of Kennedy and Schiff's dynamic. Months after their televised clash, the two were appointed to a bipartisan commission tasked with developing federal guidelines for implementing the Education Reform Act. The commission's goal was to ensure that states used the new funding effectively, balancing vocational and academic pathways while addressing equity concerns. At their first public hearing, Kennedy and Schiff sat side by side, a striking contrast to their adversarial encounter on CNN. Schiff, now more measured in his approach, acknowledged the bill's merits, saying, "Senator Kennedy and I may have started from different places, but we share a commitment to giving every student a fair shot. This commission is about turning good ideas into great results." Kennedy, ever the storyteller, responded with a nod to their shared history. "The congressman and I had a lively discussion a while back, and it helped us get here. Sometimes you've got to disagree to find out what you can agree on." The audience chuckled, recognizing the nod to their viral moment. But the sentiment was clear. The debate had laid the foundation for collaboration. This partnership symbolized a broader shift in how education reform was discussed. The commission's work drew praise for its focus on evidence-based solutions, with Kennedy and Schiff citing data from successful state programs to guide their recommendations. Their joint appearances on news programs, where they discussed the commission's progress, stood in stark contrast to the combative tone of their initial encounter. A PBS segment featured them explaining how the bill's funding had helped a rural community college in Oklahoma launch a cybersecurity training program, creating 200 jobs in a single year. Kennedy's folksy charm complemented Schiff's analytical style, and viewers noted the chemistry. One tweet captured the sentiment: Kennedy and Schiff went from throwing punches to building bridges. This is what politics should be. The commission's final report, released a year later, became a blueprint for states, with 30 adopting its guidelines within 18 months, leading to measurable improvements in workforce readiness and educational access. The media also felt the debate's lasting impact. Outlets that had once reduced education policy to simplistic narratives about college versus trade schools began producing in-depth analyses of the bill's outcomes. The New York Times ran a series on the new American workforce, highlighting graduates of vocational programs who were thriving as welders, nurses, and software developers. NBC News aired a special report on how the bill had reduced student debt in pilot states, featuring interviews with students who credited Kennedy's legislation for their financial stability. The shift wasn't just about content, it was about tone. Journalists inspired by Kennedy's fact-driven approach began asking lawmakers harder questions about data and results, moving away from sensational sound bites. A media studies professor at Columbia University noted Kennedy's debate performance raised the bar. He showed that audiences respond to substance when it's delivered with clarity and conviction. Kennedy's reputation soared in the aftermath. Once seen primarily as a colorful figure known for quotable one-liners, he emerged as a serious policy advocate whose preparation and authenticity resonated with a broad audience. Democratic leaders, initially wary of his conservative roots, began inviting him to speak on other economic issues, recognizing his ability to connect with voters across the spectrum. His office received invitations from universities and think tanks to discuss the bill, and he became a sought-after guest on talk shows where hosts came prepared with detailed questions to avoid being caught flat-footed. One CNN producer in an internal memo advised, "When booking Senator Kennedy, be ready for him to come armed with facts and stories. He's not here for talking points, he's here to make a case." The senator's approach also inspired younger lawmakers who began emulating his blend of research and relatability. A freshman representative from North Carolina told Politico watching Kennedy on CNN was a wake-up call. You can't just show up and wing it. You've got to know your stuff and know your audience. The educational lesson from this saga is profound and universal. Preparation grounded in facts and delivered with authenticity can transform disagreement into progress. Kennedy's success wasn't about out-shouting Schiff or scoring cheap points. It was about understanding the policy, anticipating critiques, and speaking directly to the needs of everyday people. His debate performance showed that a single moment of clarity can shift a national conversation, turning a divisive issue into a unifying one. For students, professionals, and anyone navigating conflict, the takeaway is clear: come prepared, stay focused on the substance, and don't shy away from tough conversations. Kennedy's ability to pivot from confrontation to collaboration with Schiff demonstrates that disagreements need not be dead ends. They can be doorways to common ground. This lesson extends beyond politics, encouraging individuals to approach challenges with diligence and a commitment to solutions that serve others. The legacy of the Kennedy-Schiff debate lies in its proof that substantive dialogue can cut through noise and polarization. For Americans frustrated by the often superficial nature of public discourse, Kennedy's approach offered a model of how to engage constructively, using facts to build bridges rather than walls. The Education Reform Act's success, now evident in the thousands of students gaining skills and jobs without crushing debt, stands as a testament to what's possible when preparation meets opportunity. As Kennedy said in a rare reflective moment during a commission hearing, "Folks, this isn't about who wins a debate. It's about making sure the next generation has a fair shot. If we can disagree, learn, and then work together, that's the kind of America I believe in." For viewers, voters, and policymakers alike, the story of this debate serves as a reminder that real change begins with the courage to engage, the discipline to prepare, and the vision to see beyond the moment to the greater good.